Hello. Today we're going to look at this technique that lets you use instancing to create these sort of Lego textures. So what we're going to do is learn how to make the individual Legos. They're a 3D object, do some really basic 3D modeling. We're going to learn how to set up the instancing pipeline, and we're going to set up how to do some interesting thing with some video textures. Let me just give you a little tour of what I've set up here in the demo project, which will be available on Gumroad. So here we have a little noise field. You can see that it is getting colored with this ramp, and it's getting transformed into this. Let's switch it up a little bit. We can get some other animations, and I really like the look of videos. I think videos look really great with this effect. This is kind of a nice driving, and what's also really cool is we can switch up the level of detail. So I'm going to down res this a little bit, and now we have much fewer Lego bricks. We can also do some interesting things with alpha and kind of remove some space. Oh, and here is me. And let's see what I look like with some more detail. There we go. I think that's a really interesting thing. This gives you a lot of opportunity to play with abstraction and different ways that you can take figures and bring things in and out within TouchDesigner for whatever you're doing. And see, at this point, it's very easy to see me, where very quickly, you have this extra layer of abstraction, which I think is very interesting. And one last thing that I think is pretty cool. This is great. When you're working with videos with alpha, things can look really cool because you basically, now you just have these sort of Lego bricks. Anyway, let's get into how you do this. So I'm going to create a base. And let's bring ourselves in here. What we want to do is get started with building our Lego brick. So what we're going to do is go into here and let's grab a box. And we're going to leave that box as is. Next, we're going to get a little tube. And this is going to act as the top of our Lego. So what we're going to do in order to place this on top, we are going to get a merge SOP. Connect those two together. And in the tube, what I'm going to do is set the center of this tube, the center of it, to be this following equation, which I figured out. And I'll explain why this is important after I type this in. We're going to do half the size of the box, the base of our Lego, part at size y, divide by 2. Let's see what that gets us. So that is going to get us over here. And what I'm actually going to do right here is I'm going to add the height of the tube. So I'm going to get me.par dot height divided by 2. The reason we're doing this is because our tube is centered at its origin. So we actually need to move it up. If the tube was centered at 0, 0, not centered, like the origin started at 0, 0 as opposed to in the middle of the tube, then we wouldn't have to do this. Anyway, you can kind of see this looking closer. So for our radius, let's get the box par dot size y divided by 4. And here we go. This isn't any official Lego, guidelines. I think it looks close enough. I was looking into actually getting proper Lego brick, things for this video, but it's okay. So we have this height, which I'm going to set also to the box divided by 4. And the reason I'm setting it up this way is we might be in the middle of our network and want to change the height of things where, I'm saying actually maybe I like 3. And we want to make sure that if I'm changing any of these parameters, it's not going to break everything else in the network. And I think that's a really important best practice to try and get used to, is like set yourself up for changes in the future. You know, if you're ever wondering why people use nulls all the time, that is the reason. It's to try and set yourself up for success in the future. So I'm going to grab this circle. I'm going to set it on orientation to ZX so it looks the proper place. I'm going to bring that into this merge. Oh, looks great. So I'm going to set this center to, this should be obvious, we're going to put it all the way at the top. So I'm going to get the opbox1 dot par dot size y. Not size y. Size y divided by 2. Perfect, because that gets you to the bottom of the top of the box, and then we're going to add the height of the tube. So that was obvious. Clearly, it was not very obvious. Excellent. Now I'll just bring the radius down to the same size as the tube, and I'm going to grab the tube1 dot par dot rad1, which is radius 1. I'm going to grab that over here as well. You can keep it the same. And now we have a nice looking Lego brick. Looks good to me. So I'm going to bring this into a transform. What I'm going to do is I want to shift this vertically, so I'm going to rotate it by 93 degrees. You can't see anything right now, but that's because our scene is not lit. We're going to put this into a null and bring this into a geometry node. Not in Blender, not a geometry node. A geo node. We're getting a light from here. I'm going to start to set up our render network. And we are going to have our light, our camera, our geo, all that good stuff, and let's get our render. And we can see in here, we can see a little edge of it. I'm going to add a Fong as the material over here. Starting to get a little more shadows. And let us bring this into a transform. What I like to do for a black background, some people like the lookup trick. I like going into a transform, setting the background color to 1 for alpha, and comp over background. There's a couple different ways you can do this. This is the way that I like to do it. And let's put this into a null. And we have our Lego in 3D space. Doesn't look great yet, but let us continue. What I'm going to do now is bring in a grid, and we're going to set up our instancing network. So I am going to grab a grid, and I'm just going to keep this the same. We have 20 rows, 20 columns. Let's not change anything quite yet. I'm going to put this into a null. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually transform this into chop data. And I have this as chop data. I'm going to bring this into a merge because I'm going to want to add other stuff into my instancing chop. I'm going to add a null. I'm going to rename this to instance data so we know what it's there for. Now if we click on Geo and we go over to Instance, click Instancing On, and bring instance data into default instance op. Now we can hit Translate X and Translate Y. And this is looking a little bit large. So what we can do is go into this transform, and let's just bring this uniform scale down quite a bit. A little bit more. There we go. Yes, excellent. Perfect. Let's grab our camera. And bring this up. This is looking good. The only thing here is that this is a square. Most of us are going to be using rectangular resolutions. If you're in the TouchDesigner uh, free tier or you're working at 4K, you're probably going to want this at a rectangular resolution. So what we can do is hit that grid, and for columns, we can go over here to the expression, go me dot par dot calls times 2. Come on. Oh, I'm representing myself. It needs to be rows. And now let's make size 2. Beautiful. That's looking great. Now let's add a video texture. So I am going to grab a noise field. So we have this noise. Let's bring the period up a little bit and bring the harmonics down. We'll play with other stuff later. Let's bring this into a lookup. Let's grab a ramp. And let's plug the ramp into the lookup. Let's go into the ramp and add some colors, whatever you'd like. It's whatever makes you happy. So I'm going to, on this left side, let's bring this up and bring this red. Maybe some orange over here. And then jump over here, get some teal. Then kind of start going darker over here. Add a nice little blue and purple. Some more magenta. And kind of end this at a bit more of a darker thing. Alright, that looks like it might work. And let us plug this into a switch, because we're going to want to play around with the texture later. Now this is a really important step. What we're going to do is put this into a fit. We're going to go over here, and in resolution, we're going to want to set the resolution of this fit to match the amount of points in this grid. If you get the step right, if you don't get it right, everything's going to break. So what I'm going to do here is get up grid1 dot par dot columns, and on H I'm going to do rows, and what I want to do is fit this fill, and I'm going to use nearest pixel, and you're going to see that looks kind of like a grid. One step I forgot within this, which will look pretty nice within our Lego system. Let's go over to the ramp, and in interpolate notches, let's hit this to step. Excellent. So what we want to do now is translate this texture data into Chop, so we can add it to this instancing data. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to click the end of this fit. I'm going to go over to Chop, and I have a top 2. Cool. We're going to go over to Crop and hit Crop Full Image. Now we have all the color channels. We're going to put this into a shuffle. And in the shuffle, we're going to go method sequence channels by name. Shuffle is a really, really cool tool. It took me a while to kind of wrap my head around. Hopefully I can do a tutorial just on shuffle at some point, but for now, right here, crop full image and shuffle sequence channels by name. Perfect. Let's bring this over, and I'm going to plug the output of this shuffle into merge. You can see that data got in there, and now we can go into the second page of instancing and grab R, G, and B. And just as a reminder for what I'm actually doing right now, this little arrow right here will always show you the options you have to plug something in. So now we have some color coming in. Let's animate this a little bit. Let's animate it on the Z. Cool. And let's also do it on the Y. Maybe let's play around with our noise a little bit more, just to get a look that we're happy with. I think that's kind of cool. Maybe we can change our colors a little bit, keep it kind of dark. That should be good for now. Okay, we're starting to look good. And this is the most basic network. This is basically everything. You know, we can start kind of playing around with things because now we have a grid that we instance with these Lego blocks. So what I can do now is, you know, I can bring in my webcam. Oh, it's not working because this is still on in the above network. Perfect. I'm going to throw my texture into this switch and switch the index. Excellent. And now we have myself in these nice Lego bricks. We can, you know, try some other stuff like bringing in let's take this ramp, copy it over. I'm going to set this to radial, and I'm going to animate the phase. Always hit the comma. 0.1. Let's put this into a transform. Scale it up a little bit. First hit tile, mirror, scale it up. And go over to here. So now let's start adding some other improvements to this. So what I want to do is give a little bit more depth to this network. So what I'm going to do is, out of this shuffle, I'm going to use my middle mouse to add a select. In here, I am going to grab the channel R and rename it to Color Transform Z. I'm going to grab a math node and go to range and go from 0 to 1. Then I'm going to go to 1, 2, 1 for now. Let's put this into merge. In our instance, we're going to set the translate Z for color transform Z. And let's actually move the camera a little bit. Perfect. And now, if we go to our math, we can play with this 1 right here. And we can give a little bit more depth to things. So I'm going to bring this up just a little bit. I found that I like 1.4 or 1.3. 1.5 looks pretty good also, especially when we go back to that noise. Starting to add a little bit of depth, and I'm really liking the way this looks. Excellent. So something that we may want to do also is play with the scale of these Legos, because you know this is pretty small right now. So what I'm going to do is set up a system that lets us switch between what is the different sizes of the network. So let's think about the variables we changed and what we're going to need to change. I'm going to set up a constant bring this over here, and I'm going to create two variables in here. One called grid size, and one called box size. So I am going to set the grid size to 20, what it's currently at, and the box size to 1, what it's currently at. So I'm going to put this into a switch, and then into a null, and I'm going to rename this as size data. So let's go over to our box and set the size over here to here. Perfect. Then in the grid, we're going to set the rows, and we're going to do a reference to these rows. Perfect. Nothing changed, and that's good, because we want to be able to switch back to this original state. That's an important thing we want to be able to do. I'm going to grab another constant. So now I'm going to double the amount of bricks. Let's go up to 40. Let's connect this constant into the switch and switch the index. So this is looking cool, but we do not have the right brick size, but we have this handy parameter. So now we can bring this down until we find it to be right. So that's too small. Looks like 0.5, 0.44 looks pretty good to me. And this is looking like a really nice effect at this point. And you know, now we're kind of entering the field of enhancements and other things to play around with. A little trick that I love to use is to add a SSAO after the render. That is going to add even more depth to your render. You can see just adding that gave the shadows a little bit more life. If you want to understand that a little bit better, you know, find someone, because there's too much to know. And I don't know how it works, but I know it does work. And that is an important lesson I've learned recently is, you know, you need to know enough to make something look good, to make it work. And maybe one day I'll have the time to really dig into this, but that day's not today. So this is looking good. Let's try another video texture in here. I have a cool video of a runner I'm going to bring in. These videos are included on the Gumroad link. I'm going to bring him into the switch, and let's go back to this runner. So another interesting thing we can play around with is changing this math node. So what I'm going to do here is add a switch. I'm going to copy this math, put it into the switch. I'm going to, on the second math, change the range from 1 to 0. Now let's change the index. And in the math, what we want to do is go to OP and set the integer to round. And now we get this really cool effect where it basically is projecting all of the pixels of the runner to the front of the screen. And we can play with this math, and you can change the range if you want. But I found that 1 and 0 work pretty well for this specific camera position. Excellent. And I think that is pretty much it for today. I can show you adding, you know, one more size, just in case you want to switch things. I mean, also check this out. This is that kind of radial force with that little math trick applied. I'm going to go back. Let's just bring this up one more level of detail and we'll call it for today. I'm going to add another constant. I'm going to bring that up to 80. Bring it into the switch. Switch the index. And let's bring this down a little bit in box size. And look at that. Excellent. I think we are looking good. Maybe bring this down a little bit more. And that's pretty much it for today. I just wanted to give kind of more still beginner, intermediate exploration of things you can do with instancing. And I'll probably try and keep playing around with this technique and see the other things that we can do with it. And I'm excited to see what other possibilities are there with Legos and TouchDesigner, because I think there's a lot of interesting applications of this for video art or VJing or what have you. Definitely download the Gumroad link, because there's a bunch of examples in there, and if you had a hard time following along, you can kind of just poke through the code. Make sure that you have the latest version of TouchDesigner installed, since I have comment boxes all over the place explaining how everything works. Thank you.